Okay, well, I want to ask what the city of Tucson knows.
Yeah, he can
Okay.
speak for the city on that. There may be others who can speak also.
Okay. Sure.
As I say, we may have other witnesses. Let's start with Chris, see where we go.
I am now ready. Thank you.
If you raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thanks.
It's about 9:50 on, it's like the 18th of November. Would you state your name, please?
Christopher Kaselemis.
Mr. Kaselemis, have you been designated by the city of Tucson to testify on behalf of the city as to matters known by or reasonably available to the city of Tucson with respect to the various matters that have been set out in the Exhibit A to the deposition notice?
Yes.
Okay. The first item listed were, and I'll read, is all efforts made to identify public records and other matters requested by Cecilia Cruz from May 13, 2013 until July 23, 2013, and by whom those efforts were made. Are you prepared on behalf of the city to describe those efforts?
Yes, I guess so. I don't know if I have the complete answer, but yes, I'll tell you what I know.
Well, I'd like you to also, do you understand that while you may have personal information, and I certainly would like that information because that's something the city knows, but that the deponent here is the city of Tucson. Do you understand that?
Yes.
And do you understand that, well, let me ask you, have you made efforts to know what efforts the city of Tucson made in responding to this request of Mr. Richard Miranda, the city manager, and the city clerk of the city of Tucson?
I believe I'm aware, yes. I'm aware of what our efforts.
Okay. How have you been made aware of it?
I understand that when we get a request like this, we check with our IT department to get all the computer files. And I met with Mr. McLaughlin several times. We've gone over, I've given him my notes and all my records. I know he's done the same with other people who've been involved with this effort.
Well, I've marked as Exhibit 1 a copy of the public records request. That was given to the clerk of the city of Tucson on May 13, 2013. when did the city of Tucson begin to look for documents and records in response to this request?
I believe we started immediately.
And what was done by the city?
They asked us to turn over any records we had, any papers, any documents, any electronic files, anything pertaining to the request. They asked us to be responsive to.
And who was asked to turn those over?
Who was asked? I was asked. Who was doing the asking? Who? I was asked to turn over records. People in my office. Hector Martinez, Mr. Miranda, Albert Elias.
Who asked you?
Who asked me?
Yeah.
We got a copy of the request, and then Mr. McLaughlin followed up with us personally to make sure we got it and understood it.
And what did Mr. McLaughlin do?
He followed up with us. He gave us a copy of the request, let us know it was there, made sure we had received it, and made sure we understood it, and asked us to comply and turn over to him everything that we had. Start gathering stuff together.
And did you do that?
Yes, I did.
So, as far as you know, did the city employees that were requested turn over to Mr. McLaughlin all of the documents in response to the request?
As far as I know, yes, I know he got some stuff from IT directly.
And what is your understanding of what Mr. McLaughlin was to do with all those documents?
He's to turn them over to the complainant.
Was any record made by the employees of the city of Tucson to show what they turned over to Mr. McLaughlin and when?
I did not do that. I don't know that other people did that.
Okay. Do you know if anyone in the city did that?
I do not know the answer.
Is it city policy for records in response to a public record request to be sent to Mr. McLaughlin or the city attorney's office prior to those records being given to the requester?
Can you restate that and quick follow?
Yeah. When a request is made for public records, is it the policy of the city attorney's office or the city of Tucson that those documents must first be sent to the city attorney's office before they are given to the requester?
That's our process.
Oh,
I don't know if it's a formal policy, but that's the process, the procedure that we follow. Yes.
okay. And it's the city of Tucson's procedure that every single request for public records, the requests first go to the city attorneys?
No, that's not right. That's just not right. I can tell you that's not right. A lot of departments handle it themselves. It's going to depend.
Okay, well, I'm sure.
I mean, I could get a phone call from somebody that asked me a question. It's not, I don't know if that's a formal request, so I can speak to this case.
Well, what, in this case, why were all the records sent to the city attorney's office?
Mr. McLaughlin called us and said, I'm going to be handling the public records request response, so please coordinate with me. Turn things over to me.
Yeah. Let me mark as Exhibit 2. I'd like you to take a look at Exhibit 2. And first of all, if you would go to the second page. And this appears to be an email string.
Yes, it does.
And would you agree that the metadata has been deleted from this string?
Objection, lack of personal knowledge, lack of technical knowledge.
I don't know what metadata means.
Okay. Would you then look on the first page?
Yes.
And you see that on the top it says from Nicole Ewing Gavin.
Yes.
Yeah, and who's she?
She is the planning and policy. She has a new title. At the time, she was planning and policy program manager, I believe,
In
in the city manager's office.
Okay, and it indicates that who she sent the email to,
Yes.
and who received a copy,
Yes.
correct?
Uh-huh.
And the date and time.
Yes.
And you'll then go to the second page and you'll see that there's an email that does not say who it's from, who it's to.
What email?
At the bottom where there's a date, 5/13 at 4:19 p.m. It's at least the way I read this, that there was an email sent at that date, at that time.
It appears that way, yes.
Yeah, but it doesn't indicate the person or who it was sent to, or the other information that would be found. Then I believe it's referred to as metadata, but the other information that was found on the first page, correct?
I don't know if anything was attached to this or not. Nothing else.
Is there any indication of who sent that?
The first one looks like city clerk.
This is at,
It says city clerk 5/13/2013 4:19.
okay.
And then it says, please contact Vicky Valenzuela, executive assistant, who works for the clerk's office, and that's the phone number to the clerk's office, and it says, thank you, clerk's office. So it appears to be from the city clerk, and it was, looks like it was sent to the attorney's office and economic development department.
Okay, and when you say the city clerk, then
Yeah.
are you presuming that Roger Randolph sent this?
I don't know if he personally sent it. It says, it appears to be from the city clerk's office. It says, thank you, city clerk's office.
Right, but normally within the system, it records what person sends it, the kind of information that's on the first page.
That's true, yes.
Yes,
Typically.
but that information has been deleted from.
No, I don't think it's
No.
been deleted.
One at
Sometimes.
a time.
Okay, so sometimes if you were to email my office, Economic Initiatives, you may get a response back, Economic Initiatives. It wouldn't be a person. So we do have other emails that are place-based, office-based, that are not personal. We do have other emails, other email accounts within departments that are, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you know which this is, which this was?
It looks like, and it's hard to tell from this, looks like it might have been a city clerk's mail address that's assigned to the city clerk's office.
Okay. And,
Let me just note, Bill, too, also, not every email in the thread is gonna have this heading, if it's part of a previous email. If it's a thread, it may not get all of this heading.
So it's not gonna have the who all it was CC'd to, for example.
and why is that?
That's the way email threads print out.
That information, however, is retained within the system, is it not?
Objection, lack of personal or technical knowledge, if you know.
I'm asking that, does the city of Tucson not retain that information within its information system?
And I'm saying, how does he know? If he knows, that's great.
I do not know that answer.
Okay. Would you agree that this email is in response to Cecilia Cruz's public records request?
Yes, it appears to be so.
And that it requests each department to respond directly to Cecilia Cruz and to forward a copy of the response letter to the city clerk's office.
We ask that each department please respond directly to the requester and forward a copy of your response letter referencing the log number to the city clerk's office. That's what it says, indicating the request has been closed out.
Okay. Is this the normal way that the city clerk responds to a public records request?
I don't know that I've ever gotten one before, so I don't know that I can answer that.
Okay, so, and other than that, you don't know how the city of Tucson or the city clerk's office ordinarily responds, correct?
I'm not sure how the city, what role the city clerk's office plays in responses to requests like this.
Okay. But in this case, where the city attorneys, the city clerk's office requested each department to respond directly to the requester, Ms. Cruz, correct?
That's the way I read it.
Okay. And then, who's Yvonne Espino?
Yvonne Espino is, I believe her title is office manager in the city manager's office.
Okay. And does she have a role concerning public records requests within the city manager's office?
I don't know if she normally does it. It looks like here that she did for this one. I don't know if she always has that role or not.
Is there anyone within the city manager's office that has the role or task of being the public records person within that office?
I don't, not that I'm aware of, but there's one standing person. I'm not aware that there is.
So as far as, and that's your personal knowledge, whether the city of Tucson's aware, you don't know?
Well, I work for the city manager's office. I've not been told that for all public records requests, this is the person you always respond. So I'm in that office and I've never been told that.
Oh, okay. I've been in that office several times and I've been told that there's a specific person that responds to it. But you're unaware of it, right?
I've not been told that, just as I responded.
But what Yvonne is saying is that, and do you know, well, who's Nicole Ewan Gap?
Objection, he just asked an answer, but go ahead.
She's at this time she was the program director of planning and policy, I believe was her title. She worked for the city manager's office.
Okay. Yeah. And she's told by Yvonne to fulfill the request and whatever the request of Ms. Cruz was, to fulfill it and take them to Dennis McLaughlin, correct?
Nicole says this is going to be up to the attorney's office to determine what is public record and when.
Well, at 8:48, 8:38 p.m. on the 13th, Yvonne writes Nicole and says, take them to Dennis. Fulfill the request and take them to Dennis, correct?
Let's see. Yvonne says, Nicole, please fulfill the request, provide me with the response documents, and I will take them to Mr. McLaughlin for approval. Yes.
And then again, Nicole on the 14th says that the attorney's office will determine what is public record and when.
Is that a question?
Did I read that correctly?
You read that correctly, yes, you
Yeah.
did.
Does the city of Tucson have a policy as to what is public record?
If you know.
I don't know that I know the answer to that.
Yeah.
I think for questions, we let the city attorney's office tell us whether it's public record or not. I mean, everything's public record, but there's some things that are confidential based on law, I guess, I'm not sure.
So, I thought I heard you say both ways. You understand that all the records in your office are going to either be public records or what are called other matters under the Arizona statutes.
Yes,
Do you agree?
Yes, I agree and I understand that.
Okay. And so does the, as far as you know, the city attorney's office determine what's a public record?
Well,
If you know.
I think it's all public, anything we do is public record. I think some stuff can be released and some stuff can't be released based on the sensitivity or the confidentiality. And that's up to the attorney's office in terms of the law.
And is, do you know when your office fulfilled the request with the responsive documents by sending them to the city attorney's office?
Would you please restate that?
Sure. Do you know when the city manager's office complied with the request of Ms. Cruz and sent all the documents to Dennis McLaughlin and the city attorney's office?
I do not know the date that occurred.
Did you make any effort prior to coming to this deposition to determine the date that occurred?
No, I did not.
So, as to any records sent to the city attorney's office, are you aware of when those records would have been sent?
I don't know exact dates of when we sent stuff.
Okay. So, to phrase it perhaps a little clearer, the city of Tucson is not prepared today to give testimony as to when any documents were delivered to the city attorney's office or to Dennis McLaughlin.
Through this witness?
Through any witness.
He can only answer for himself. I mean, there are multiple witnesses that the city may need to call. So are you asking him his knowledge?
No, this deposition was scheduled for the city of Tucson.
Well, the
and-
city speaks through human beings, and there may be one and there may be more, as 30B6 says. So he can't necessarily answer for the city as a whole.
Well, this deposition was scheduled for the city of Tucson to present a person to testify as to matters known by or reasonably available to the city of Tucson.
Right, and I've told you there may be more than one. I told you that before the deposition started, and I'm telling you now. And you have multiple matters listed in your Exhibit A,
Yeah.
some known to some people, some to others. He may know a lot about a lot of them. But we're not accepting that you can say, well, the city simply isn't prepared to testify in this with one witness, when I've told you we may need more than one witness. If you want him to answer that question as to his knowledge, then great. But there may be other city witnesses who would answer that differently.
Well, really, I'm here to depose the city of Tucson, and I want the city to comply by having someone who would testify on behalf of the city of Tucson as to, this first one is the effort to identify public records requested by Cecilia Cruz and by whom those efforts were made.
Right, and I'm telling you, we can only depose one at a time. And here's the guy with the most knowledge on the most topics that we're starting with. So I'm not bringing 5 people over for one deposition. So go ahead. Re-ask your question.
So as to this first category, do I understand you're only prepared to testify as to what you personally have done? Would that be correct?
On behalf of the city.
Well, I answered in the general of what we typically do and where the records come from. And other than that, it's what I personally do. And I did not document the dates that I turned stuff over to Dennis. To get to the specific question that you asked.
And the determination to be made by the city attorney's office of when documents would be turned over, what's the city's understanding of what that determination was about?
I don't know if Dennis gave us, typically the city attorney's office will give us a date that they're compiling stuff and they want to have stuff sent over by a certain date. So for this case, I don't remember the exact date that he told us to have stuff together by. But typically you'll say, can you pull everything together by Friday or in a couple of days, whatever it is, and that's typically what happens, I believe.
And would you agree that the city of Tucson informed its employees, in fact Dennis McLaughlin apparently, that time was of the essence from the viewpoint of the requester, Cecilia Cruz?
Yes, and that's typical that we're very responsive to these requests.
No, if you would look at 5/16/2013, there's
Yes.
an email from Dennis McLaughlin
Yes.
where he was saying she, meaning Cecilia Cruz, was calling the city and wanted to view records as time is of the essence.
Her words, not mine.
Yes.
Yes, I see this.
So the requester was saying that in this case, it's especially important that she receive these documents soon. Would you agree?
Yes, I would agree to that.
Then on 5/16, there's an indication that there would be a meeting on the afternoon of 5/16/2012 And that it could be that the deal is off with Grand Canyon and the city concerning El Rio. Did you see that?
Objection, I don't see that. I don't understand. Are you paraphrasing?
Well, I believe it's Nicole Ewing Gavin, 11:05 a.m. And it says, I have not contacted anyone as I'm not sure what to say in terms of timeline and what is confidential. I will be out the rest of the afternoon. Perhaps Camilla and Andy can assist if documents need to be gathered. If documents need to be gathered, or the requester needs to be called. For your information, after the visit to Grand Canyon University today, this will either be a moot point, Princess, deal is off, or a lot more information is going to be made public. Did I read that part correctly?
Yes, you did.
Yeah. So as of following the afternoon of the 16th of May, was in fact the deal off with Grand Canyon University?
I do not believe so.
Yeah. When do you believe the deal was off?
The day that that article came out in the paper, we got a phone call from Grand Canyon saying they're no longer considering that site. The deal for that site, I should be some more precise. They were still interested in looking at Tucson at that point.
Yeah, do you know what the date was of that?
Date that the article came out, I don't have that handy. Yeah, if I could see that, I could probably tell you the date.
Let me show you what's marked as exhibit, what, 3?
Yes.
Which is a letter that you received, at least there's a ceasing indicating that you personally received it, dated May 28th.
Correct. And this is the date that we were informed by Grand Canyon. They know we're no longer considering the site, but they were still looking at other sites in the Tucson area.
Okay. There's no mention of any continued interest on any city site, correct?
It doesn't mention one way or the other.
When you did you personally send documents to the city attorney's office to Mr. McLaughlin?
I handed documents to Mr. McLaughlin. I don't know if I sent them to him, but I did deliver documents to Mr. McLaughlin.
Okay. And did you speak with him?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. And did you talk about what documents were available?
What documents, were available?
What was the purpose of your trip to Mr. McLaughlin's office?
To turn over documents that were requested.
Yeah. And were these documents that you had and were available to you, or did you accumulate documents of other individuals?
They were my documents.
And what type documents did you turn over to Mr. McLaughlin?
I had a couple of folders, and it had stuff from Grand Canyon, stuff from Trio, I think it had some meeting notes. It was a compilation of quite a, some substantial amount of stuff. Various types of stuff from working on a project that you'd expect to see.
How big a group of documents did you turn over to him?
Oh, just guessing, maybe 30 pieces of paper, plus we had some booklets and stuff from Trio.
Okay. And would that have been within a couple of days of your initial request for those documents? How soon after you were asked for them?
I assume it was fairly soon afterwards. I can't remember exactly when Dennis came down.
Just give me a moment.
Early September, because that's like, we have a meeting on the 6th.
Did you want to change your answer?
So it may have been later than this. I don't know exactly the date.
Or could it have been a couple months later?
It could have been,
Okay.
because it was a fairly long project.
Okay. So, when then there was a specific, request for, on May 13th, the very day of the, request that Cecilia Cruz, made her request, asking that each department respond directly to Ms. Cruz. Later, the city attorney's office said, no, don't respond to her, respond to the city attorney. And you don't know whether it was within 2 or 3 months of that date when you gave documents to the city attorney's office. Is that correct?
I can't recall the exact date.
Yeah.
I turned stuff over.
Can you recall the month?
Not at this point.
And did Mr. McLaughlin or anyone from the city attorney's office ask you to bring documents to them?
Mr. McLaughlin requested that documents be sent to him, be given to him, as he was coordinating all the documentation for the request.
Why would there have been a long delay between your request and actually giving him the documents?
I'm not sure.
Did anyone ask you to delay bringing him the documents?
No.
Were you waiting for any kind of legal opinion or further instruction before giving him the documents?
Yes. I mean, I was taking the city attorney's office's lead in pulling together information.
Okay.
And
So if the city attorney's office did not ask you to bring up documents, you didn't pick them up?
I believe all my documentation went through Mr. McLaughlin in the attorney's office when he wanted them, when he asked for them.
Okay. And do you have any record of when he asked you to bring them to him?
No, I do not.
Could it have been as late as September?
It could have been.
And how were you asked? Was it orally or in a written document to bring it to him?
I can't remember exactly. Dennis typically phone calls down.
When you did at some point, within a few months after the initial request, take documents to Mr. McLaughlin, did you take him copies of your emails?
The copies that were in my folder, if I had made any copies, those would have been turned over to him also. I didn't copy all my emails. I think that was through the IT department that usually typically comes through.
Okay. And what do you mean by your folder?
I had 2 manila folders like you have there. One said Project Study, one said Grand Canyon.
Okay. Did you also have what's called an email folder for this project?
No, I did not.
You know what I mean by an email folder?
No.
Okay.
If you mean it was a folder that had emails in it, I did not have one.
Does the term share drive mean anything to you?
Yes?
What does share drive mean?
It's an electronic folder file that can be shared among more than one employees.
Okay. Did you have one or more share drives related to this project?
There was an electronic shared drive, I believe, called Project Study.
Did you turn that information over to Mr. McLaughlin?
He has access to that through the IT department directly. It doesn't go through my hands.
Okay, so Mr. McLaughlin had access to the project study shared drive,
Correct?
correct? And he had access to your emails, correct?
Yes, he did.
Yeah. And he wouldn't need to request you to get any of those, correct?
I believe those come directly through the IT department. I think they go in through the back way and get anything they want. I think the role of Mr. McLaughlin in my office is to say which files pertain to this case. So the IT department may not know that Project Study is related to this request. We would tell them Project Study is the Grand Canyon project. So we tell them where stuff is, and they make copies or make access. That's my understanding.
I'm sorry, when you say we tell them,
So you would ask me, where did you keep electronic files? I would say most of it is in a electronic shared drive folder called Project Study or whatever. And then the IT department would then have access to that directory. That's my understanding.
just give me one moment.
I think it's the same. Yeah. Yes. Yes. So, Mr. McLaughlin did have a copy of our directory, our shared drive, which then I believe he turned over to you, the whole entire directory.
This, let me look at what's marked as Exhibit 4. Is that an example of a document in the project study shared drive?
Sorry, what's the question?
Yeah, is that an example of a document that would be found in the project study shared drive?
I would say no.
And why is that?
Bill, are you talking about the email?
An email?
Yeah,
Emails don't go in shared drives unless you make a file out of it. So if I were to make this a Word document or a PDF, I could then save it in the shared drive, but otherwise it's in my emails or Camila's emails.
okay. So you're just, this is simply an email letting her know that you set up this shared drive.
This looks like it's telling her I have something, a folder in the Economic Development Shared Drive called Project Study.
Right. And who had access to project study folder in the shared drive in the Economic Development Office?
I think it's open to anyone in the city manager's office, but I can tell you who's in my office.
Okay.
Who works in my office?
So everyone in the city manager's office would have access to this?
I believe they can all get access to it.
Okay. Let me show you Exhibit 5. Is that the, well, interpret that for me. What's going on with this?
I don't see an email attached to this, just a from to date subject. Has something been deleted or something?
I have no idea. This is a document, I believe, that we received.
I believe Amy Santos works for Ward 1 office. And I can't tell what this is.
Well, the subject is shared folder notification.
Yes, it is.
Correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Would I be interpreting this correctly, that Diana Rhodes was given access to a shared folder?
I would not interpret that from this piece of information.
Oh. So does the top where it says D Road 1, do you know what CHPO3 means?
That's just part of her email address.
CHDOM2?
Again, it's part of her email address.
So this, the way you interpret this is an email with really this is just the metadata, and there's, or some of it, and there's, the contents of the email isn't there. Is that the way you interpret that?
Unless there were no contents. I mean, I don't see anything written besides subject. The page is blank.
Yeah. Does the term shared folder notification mean anything?
No.
You mean you don't know what it means? Could you clarify that a little? It could mean a lot of things.
Could mean a lot of things. I don't know what topic this is even on. This may not even relate at all to what we're talking about today. Doesn't say anything about.
If someone outside of the city manager's office wants to get information from a shared drive, how do they go about doing that?
They would have to do a public records request, I believe.
No, doesn't someone within the city, couldn't they ask the IT department or your department head for permission to access the shared drive?
Are you asking if any citizen can just look into the shared drive of the city of Tucson?
No, I'm not. I'm really asking about city employees, but I don't know. I mean, is there not a system whereby someone who could obtain authority to go into a shared drive? Like your project study shared drive.
So my understanding for shared drives is they're shared amongst a certain group of people that's based on a group that IT's put together.
Yeah.
So if somebody from General Services Department wanted access to the shared drive that the city manager's office used, they couldn't just get that. Their computer wouldn't allow them to do that. I guess they could make a request to somebody to gain access. They'd have to justify why they would need access to that. And I don't know that they can get access. That their computer's either hooked into that system or not hooked into that system. But maybe it could be allowed access, possibly.
Yeah. And if that occurs, then do they receive a notification that they're authorized to go into a shared drive and get information?
I'm not aware of how that has occurred, if it's even ever occurred. I've never heard of that. I don't believe that you get a request, a topic-specific request. You need access to all the things in that shared drive, or you have your own shared drive among your group of employees, is how it typically would work.
Do you know what a rich text format is?
testing my IT knowledge here. If I had a multiple choice I could maybe answer, I don't think I could give you a definition.
Okay. Do you know if, when documents are put in a rich text format, that it strips out the metadata?
I don't understand that.
Were you ever informed that Cecilia Cruz wanted metadata?
I was not aware of that.
Did you, okay.
And I'm not, you keep using the term metadata, and that's not a term I'm familiar with.
Okay.
So if you can define that, it could maybe help you better.
At any point, did Dennis McLaughlin or the city attorney's office request metadata?
Could you define metadata for me, please?
I might be able to, but my question is, were you ever aware that the requester citizen had requested that information include metadata?
Again, if you could define that term for me,
Yeah.
I could help you, I could answer the question. I'm not trying to be difficult. I don't understand what the term metadata means or how you're using that.
Well, it has a variety of meanings, as
Okay.
I understand it.
Okay.
But do you have any understanding of it?
I've stated I don't understand how that term's used, what that means.
Okay. And does the city of Tucson have any understanding of what that term means?
There may be people in the city of Tucson that understand that. I'm not one of them.
Okay.
It's not a term that I use.
And personally, no one ever used that term with you in terms of a request, correct?
No, they did not.
Were you ever requested to turn over any of your electronic information to the city attorney's office?
Yes.
What kind of information, electronic information, were you requested to turn over to the city attorney's office?
Anything related to this request. Shared drive, directory, information, emails.
And did you do that?
Yes.
How
Or
did you
either I
do
did
that?
or somebody from my office did that.
Yeah, how do you know that?
How do I know that?
Yeah, how do you know that either you did it or someone from your office did it?
Because I sat down with Dennis and gave that to him.
Okay, that would be responsive to what you did. How about, or someone from my office? How do you know what they did?
I know I was on vacation at one point, and I believe people turned over, I believe Dennis had communication with some people in my office, and they turned over some information.
Do you know when any of that occurred?
I can't recall dates.
Yeah. Does do you know if your office made any notations, or anyone in your office made notations of when that occurred?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah. How could anyone find out when that occurred?
I'm not sure they could.
Okay. So Dennis McLaughlin would know, correct?
I don't know if he keeps records on when we turned that stuff over to him. I'm not sure what his record keeping is.
Okay. And at least in terms of being responsive to this deposition request, the city of Tucson has made no effort to determine when these various items were turned over, as far as you know, correct?
Assuming we have any records of that at all.
I don't know that we keep records of that.
Well, the city hasn't checked to see, correct?
I don't know, I would not myself write down the date that I turn stuff over to Dennis, and I don't think anybody on my staff would do that. That's not something we would typically do. We would have no reason to do that.
Why wouldn't you? Doesn't it sound like something like a bureaucrat would say, I turned over my stuff today, and gee, Nicole and Yvonne, have you sent your stuff in? I just gave all mine. There would have been, as far as you know, none of that sort of communication.
There may have been communication, I don't know if people would record the dates for that.
On item number 2, the identity of electronic document management system individuals who are tasked with the city manager and mayor and council and the involvement of those individuals with the search for records. Are you prepared to testify about that subject?
No, I'm not.
We have IT. We have IT people who will be.
The city record coding of activities related project study, El Rio or Grand Canyon University. Are you prepared to testify about that?
What is record coding? What do
Well,
you mean by that?
It's my understanding that the city has a sophisticated record system and that information is coded by project or in other ways, and that the IT department or other people can readily find information based on the city's coding system by project or task. That's what I meant.
Well, for my office, we give projects names, and they may have more than one name, as is in this case. There's no policy for naming projects or coding them in my office.
Is there a administrative directive or other policy of the city in that regard?
Not with what I was just talking about. Not for projects that I'm working on. There's no policy for what I need to call that project.
Well,
Bill, I think you're mistaken in some of your assumptions, and we'll have IT talk to you on that if
Sure.
you want.
What names have you used concerning this project?
Project study, Grand Canyon. I don't think I used El Rio I don't believe. I think just those two names. I'm pretty sure. Just Project Study and Grand Canyon.
On item 4, the all efforts made to identify public records and other matters requested by Cecilia Cruz from July 23 until present. Are you prepared to testify about that?
Well, we've already talked about some of that, correct? Wasn't that the topic we were just going over?
No.
The date period is different.
All efforts made.
Mr. Kaselemis,
Yes.
you'll recall that you testified at an order to show cause hearing.
Yes.
Okay. Keep that date in mind. What this is asking for is efforts to identify public records and matters responsive to Ms. Cruz's request that were made after that hearing.
After the trial?
After that hearing, after you testified.
I can testify as to my involvement.
Okay, tell
So,
me about that.
Mr. McLaughlin came down and said, there's another request for additional information. Is there anything else that you have?
And do you know what that request was.
That was the request. Have we turned over everything? Is there anything else that you have? Anything else? That was his request to me, based on the requests.
Well, let me be a little more specific.
Okay.
You might want to show him the request.
This might be a good time to change tapes. Going off. The time is 11:37, and we're going back on the record.
This one too, Bill?
Yeah.
67.
Off the record, I'd like to, or when we were off the record, we were talking, and I would like to put it on the record, which is that the city will be providing probably Hector Martinez, but a different witness to testify on the city's behalf for items 12 through 17, and then perhaps someone from some of those prior items that this witness wasn't prepared to testify about.
Correct. We would anticipate on 12 through 17, and also your number 11, document A2, is probably Hector as well. And we would anticipate someone from our information technology department to testify on other matters,
Okay.
certain other matters.
So I would like you to then look at Exhibit 6 of this deposition, which is the item that is identified as A2 in the deposition notice. It's the Grand Canyon offer proposal.
Sorry, Bill, I think you mean A1. The 6 I have is your A1.
A1, okay. Right. The Grand Canyon offer proposal is A1. Okay, I had it marked. Okay. Then this item, the city of Tucson was to present a witness to testify about the process and persons involved in the preparation of Exhibit 6, which is the Grand Canyon offer proposal.
This looks like it's just a portion of it, though, correct?
I don't know. I have, there's a mark as Exhibit 7 to this deposition is a letter signed by the city manager, which I think is A3.
In 30B6 notice.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay, so this was not an offer proposal, this was some kind of draft, it appears. It's different.
You're speaking of Exhibit 6.
Exhibit 6 is not a letter that I believe went to Grand Canyon, it was an internal document.
So, is there a question?
Yeah, the question is, what was was the process and persons involved in the preparation of this document?
So this is a document that either I prepared or I had knowledge of and directed that this be prepared. So it might have been Camila Bacot may have actually written it up based on my discussions with her, but with information from other people too, in terms of some of the input here.
Okay. Who were those other people?
I believe some of the information that came from Hector's information, Hector Martinez. So the information he got from his external people, I think, played a part in this.
Well, let's start with item listed number 1.
Uh-huh.
A 50-year ground lease.
Yes.
How was it discussed and who proposed? How did Tucson end up proposing a 50-year ground lease?
That was an internal decision. We had heard that they were interested in a long-term ground lease. So we were thinking of 25 or 50 years, or something like that.
How did you hear that they wanted a long-term ground lease?
It was either in the written materials or they told us on the phone during one of the conversations we had with them.
And would there be if you had this conversation over the phone, would someone take notes? Would there be writings that would reflect what was said?
There could have been or maybe not.
Yeah.
We
Was
don't-
there?
I do not recall writing a note about this.
Yeah. Is that typically the kind of thing that you would have made a note about?
Maybe not. There's no typical, depending on. That might have been something that, through a 10-minute conversation, was the most important thing, and I would have maybe been able to remember that. Good memory for some things.
So,
But this was something that again, we took information, and in trying to be responsive to them, given the city parameters, this came from us. This is an internal document, an idea to float around to internal people to see if this makes sense and pass the give class test, and just an internal working document, I would classify it.
what's your understanding of what a ground lease is?
A lease for the land.
And would the title remain in the name of the city of Tucson?
Yes, the title of the land would remain in the city's name, yes.
And that would not be taxed?
The land would not be taxed, the improvements would be taxed.
Yeah, but the land would not be taxed, correct?
I believe that it would not be taxed.
And
But the value would really be in the improvements anyway.
Trio had given your office some information, had they not, that and to Grand Canyon, that the tax benefits to Grand Canyon would be something like $7.2 million over 5 years with a lease. Are you aware of that?
Objection. How would he be aware of that? Do you have something to show him that they said that?
Yeah, there's a bunch of those, but let me.
Do you know, Chris?
7.2 million figure does not ring a bell with me.
Did
Is this something, is it in here or not?
I mean, there would be a value. If they didn't have to pay tax on the land, there would be a value assigned to that, which would be incorporated into the test we do to see whether we pass the gift class or not. So I would acknowledge that there's a savings if land is in our name and there's no tax assigned to that. If that's what you're asking.
No, I'm, see if I have it here. It seems like the kind of thing y'all would remember, but do you recall seeing information, and I believe it was developed by Trio, as to the tax savings that Grand Canyon University would, actually it was, I think Trio developed the data, but it was in a document prepared by the city of Tucson that indicated what the 5-year tax savings would be to Grand Canyon University if the property remained in the city's name. Does that?
Yeah, that does ring a bell now, that they had put out a figure, I think in their first book, which had a property tax savings to proposed property tax savings, which I don't think was accurate. Because I think one of the things Trio didn't understand was, I think they were assigning a value to the whole property built out. And what I remember explaining to them was, if the property is not used for a government purpose, there is a tax liability. So I think that was a wrong statement, because that would not be government purpose. So it's only non-taxable if the city-owned land is used for a government purpose.
Yeah. Did you or someone in your office meet with the Pima County assessor to discuss this?
I don't believe we met with them.
Okay. So,
We may have made a phone call, but I don't think so. I think that is knowledge that the city attorney's office has. And I knew that also.
well, actually, I think Trio probably met with them. Would that be the kind of thing they would often do?
I think what Trio did was looked at the tax liability for that property over the 5-year period
Yeah.
and said, oh, if it's on city land, there will be no tax liability. Let's write that down there as a tax savings. And then I looked at that and said, if it's not a city purpose, there's not that kind of savings. That's not an accurate figure.
Okay. Well, I believe that this 7.2 million tax savings was put on a city document that the city of Tucson prepared to give to Trio. Does that make sense?
I think the figure was in the book from Trio and it was assigned to us, but it wasn't accurate. So it did not come from us, but it came from Trio based on their assumptions, which were not wholly accurate.
Well, what would be the tax savings to Grand Canyon?
To Grand Canyon, the property tax savings, I could be far less than that. If the improvements are, I can't remember what the improvements were, 600 million, but I'd say 90% of the tax liability still would be paid. I'm just off the top of my head. Maybe only 10% of the value. If they had a campus there, whatever that value tax liability is, maybe 10% would not be paid because of the land, underlying land. It's very low compared to the value of the property.
Yeah. So,
And that's just a guess.
yeah, if I'm following what you're saying, is that with a ground lease, the title remains within the city.
Correct.
And the land is not taxed.
Correct.
And the land would not be taxed for 50 years.
There's no tax liability on the land. There is tax on the improvements. Any buildings, any structures would all be taxed.
Yeah. If they built structures, the structures would be taxed.
Absolutely, yes.
Would that depend on the lease agreement itself?
Objection. This isn't a real estate deposition, it's a records deposition. So, what's your records question?
are you aware whether the city of Tucson has a rule about the length of time that the city would enter into leases for city property?
I'm not sure if there's a policy or not regarding that. If there is, it's a mayor and council policy, which mayor and council could veer from if they so choose.
So the 50-year term, is this something that that Trio suggested, or is this something that was arrived at
Internally.
by your department?
Yes, by my department.
Is the city aware of any other lease by the city of Tucson of city property to a private company or person for a length of 50 years?
Objection, lack of personal knowledge.
Yeah,
Go ahead and
I
answer.
personally know that answer to that question. I don't know the answer.
Did-
I don't have any knowledge of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the longest that you know about?
I don't know. I'm not familiar with the lease terms.
Okay. So, it strikes me, I actually think that the city has a policy that you don't list more than, they have a lease for 5 years and perhaps another 10 at the most in terms of further. So what I'm really trying to get at, because I think that that's an astonishing length of time, and I would expect that there would have been an examination or search or inquiry as to whether the city could enter into a ground lease for a 50-year term. So are you aware of any examination or request or any documents that dealt with a lease for 50 years, or that proposal for a lease for 50 years?
The 50-year figure, I believe, came from my office, and other people in the city who have knowledge about the policies and the practices were advised of this. So Hector Martinez probably knew about it. Mike Rankin, the city attorney, may have known about it. So it's, again, it's a working document, a figure thrown out there by my office.
Did your office do an analysis of what the cost to the taxpayers would be of that property not being taxed for 50 years?
It's not being taxed now. So I don't know the question.
Yeah. My question is, did your office do an analysis of what the cost to the taxpayers would be
With the value, yes.
of that property not being taxed for 50 years?
The value of the land for 50 years?
Yes.
Was that part of the economic analysis that was performed for us? Is that the question?
Look,
I can look at the analysis again.
you understand that Grand Canyon University is a for-profit private company?
Absolutely.
Yes.
What is your records question?
I'm repeating it so he'll understand.
That's fine, but have a records component to it.
It does.
Okay.
You've testified that you understand that, the city understands that if the property is in the city's name for 50 years and the land's not in title to a private for-profit company, that company will not pay taxes on the
There'd be a tax
On the
savings.
land.
There would be a tax savings, yes, there would be.
yeah.
Was that included in the analysis?
Yeah, my question is, did you calculate the value of what the taxes would be that the loss to the city over a 50-year period?
The benefit of that tax abatement to the potential prospect was calculated, I believe.
And who did that?
Did we do that? Trying to recall. I don't recall.
Would that be found in any written document?
Well, is it not? It might be in the record, the information we gave to Applied Economics, maybe provided to her, Sarah Merling. Is it not on here?
How did you provide information to Sarah?
Typically, we emailed her information.
And,
Sometimes we've called her with clarifications or updated numbers.
and was that information about what was supplied to her turned over to the city attorney's office or Mr. McLaughlin?
I can't recall specifically if that was, but if it was available in my file folder, it was available to Dennis, and it would have been made available to him.
So in terms of the 50-year lease term was
Mhm.
something that you all just came up with yourself. It was thrown out by you all as an idea. And you may or may not have quantified that, but if so, you think you would have given it to the economic company hired by the city in Phoenix.
I believe we did quantify it to show the savings to Grand Canyon. It would have been in our interest to do that.
Yeah. And do you know how it would have been quantified?
I can't recall that.
If I ask, did you quantify it in your office?
I can't remember whether I did. I probably did, but I can't recall.
Yeah. If you did it, how would you do it?
Well, that's what I'm trying to remember, and I can't remember how I did that.
Yeah.
But it would have been to my advantage to do that analysis.
And you would have determined what the tax savings would be for a period of time, correct?
Correct.
And you would multiply that by 50.
Right?
And then would you arrive at, what would you do with that number?
We would list that out to them. We would show them, we'd try to show Grand Canyon the savings or the incentives for choosing a piece of city land for this particular property. So we would have quantified for them.
But you don't, right now you don't know if there's any records that reflect that.
I do not recall if there are any records.
And the lease payment would be 75% below market value. How was that arrived at?
Well, again, everything has to pass the gift clause, so we need to show that we're not giving up more than the taxpayers are getting in benefits. Otherwise, we violate the gift clause. So it may have been, so all these different components work together, and we do, here are the benefits, here are the benefits to Grand Canyon, or savings, here are the benefits to the taxpayers. And we need to show that we're receiving more than we're giving out. So we have different variables that we can throw in there to make those so it comes out the way it legally needs to come out.
Yeah.
So the 75% may have been a figure that made that calculation work.
And made what calculation work?
Calculation of benefit received versus benefit given up, taxes given up.
Who would have determined that 75% below market value for rent was something that the city should propose?
Again, there are a lot of moving components: the years of the lease, the market payments, the taxes to be received, the primary jobs incentive. There are many, many components, and again, we line them up and say, here are the savings here's what the city's giving up in taxes, here's what we're receiving in taxes, and our receipt column must be bigger than our column where we're providing incentives.
Okay. In terms of the records, we've not received any of the work documents. Should there not have been work documents that would go through each of these proposals, each of the values as to what it cost the city, what the benefit to the other side was, what's the value of what the city's giving up? Here's an offer proposal with astonishing numbers in it, but surely there must be work papers, there must be mathematical notations, there must be a process that was gone through. Don't those papers exist?
Every paper that I had, any working paper, was turned over to you. Anything that I had.
Yeah. Well,
There are no documents back in my office that I'm hiding, that I have not turned over to you.
My
My plan-
time change. If I could, please.
I had understood that you said Mr. McLaughlin came down and told you that there was another request for additional information.
Well, I believe it was more of, more of a double checking. Did we give them everything? Is there anything else that we have? Have we not turned over everything to them? Do you have anything else? That was the nature of the conversation.
Did you have anything else?
I went over the contents of my folders like I had done previously, and we went over document by document, and he would say, yes, I have this, yes, that doesn't seem relevant, or whatever. We went through document by document.
Yeah. So there would be documents, and this was your project study or Grand Canyon file?
Correct.
Yeah. And Mr. McLaughlin would make a determination that records within that file he didn't think were relevant.
Well, I think most of the pieces of paper, you'd say, I already have this one, they've already got this one, let me make a copy of that one, just to make sure. That was the nature of the conversation.
Yeah. Well,
There may have been something like a business card in there or something where he would say, this is not relevant, or there may have been pieces of paper that weren't relevant.
yeah. So had you put information in that file after July 23?
No, I did not put anything in there.
Okay. So why was not all of that information given to Mr. McLaughlin before July 23, 2013?
We had gone over everything. I think he was more double checking to make sure everything was already provided to him. Just kind of going it more piece by piece.
Okay. So everything that was in your file had in fact been turned over and made available to Mr. McLaughlin prior to July 23. Is that correct?
Everything was made available. I don't know that he made a copy of everything. And there were some things that were attached to other parts of other things that he wanted to make sure. He was saying that this goes with this, doesn't it? And this goes with this, to make sure he had the order of everything.
Okay.
So it's just clarifying in his mind a little bit what went with what.
Okay. But he had physically had your entire file previously. Is that correct?
I don't know that he had it in his possession. I think he had gone through it. We'd gone through it together.
What when had you gone through it together before?
Previous to the trial.
Yeah. How many days, weeks prior to the trial?
I can't recall the date of that.
Okay. Do you have any information in your office that would indicate when you met with Mr. McLaughlin to go over the contents of your file?
I don't believe I do.
Yeah. Do you maintain a calendar that indicates when you meet with people?
Yes, I do.
Would you have written on that calendar?
If it was scheduled appointment. Many times I meet with people and it's not an appointment.
Okay. So at some date that you can't recall when, prior to July 23rd, all the documents in your file have been available to Mr. McLaughlin.
Absolutely, yes.
And after July 23rd, you again met with Mr. McLaughlin with the same file to which no additional documents had been added. Correct?
We did the same thing we'd done before on several occasions.
And do you know if anyone else in your office had a similar process?
Process.
Did Mr. McLaughlin look in the files or talk to other people in your office?
Yes, I believe he did.
Okay. Do you know who those people are?
I believe he met with Camila Bacat from my office,
Uh-huh.
and I'm not sure if he met with Andy Squire or not. But he may have talked to Andy.
Okay. And you, in terms of this project, did you have someone that supervised you and told you what to do in this project?
I was the lead for my office. I report to the city manager, and I get advice from the city attorney's office, and I get counseling from other employees. I might ask Albert Elias, I might ask Kelly Gottschalk, other people who are, I think, have good advice. I might ask them for advice.
What was Albert Elias's relationship to this project? What was his role?
He was, I would say, an advisor.
Did he supervise you?
No, he did not.
Okay. Richard Miranda supervised you?
He's my supervisor.
Yeah. And only him on this project?
Yes. Now, just to clarify, there are people that are above me in the rank, in order between me and the city manager, who could ask me something or tell me something, and I would respond to them since they're at a higher classification. If the assistant city manager asked me to do something, I would respond to that. I wouldn't say, I don't report to you, I report to the city manager. I would be responsive.
So as to item number 4, all you know about is your meeting with Mr. McLaughlin, and Camilla may have met with Mr. McLaughlin.
I believe that's accurate, yes.
Yeah. But in terms of what other efforts were made on behalf of the city of Tucson or the city manager or the city clerk, you're not aware of those efforts. Correct?
I'm not personally aware. Mr. McLaughlin probably contacted other people to recheck.
Yeah, but I mean, you're not prepared to testify on behalf of the city of Tucson what those efforts were.
Objection, that's a mischaracterization. He's prepared to testify based on what he knows.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm clarifying.
Right.
Yeah.
There may be many people in the city of Tucson that could,
Well, I'm
but
sure.
we're deposing him.
No, well, okay. We're deposing the city of Tucson.
Through one of its representatives.
Item number 5, the city's understanding of TRIO's role in Grand Canyon University's search for a Pima County site and the identity of TRIO's client. Are you prepared to testify on behalf of the city of Tucson about that category?
Yes, I am.
Okay. What's your understanding of TRIO's role?
As I explained in the trial, the client first went to TRIO to say they were looking for a site in the Pima County area, in addition to sites in Albuquerque and I believe Las Vegas. So their role was to pull together the economic development people, maybe other people, maybe the city manager, to notify each city to let us know that this was happening, and to have us start looking for potential sites for the client. Then Pima County compiled sites. They also compiled a list of the various incentives that are offered by different jurisdictions, including Pima County. And they, I believe, put those together and compiled those into a book. And when we first went to the office, we signed a non-disclosure agreement. So we knew that it was Grand Canyon, but we were not allowed to tell anybody outside that room that it was Grand Canyon.
So the city of Tucson's understanding of the identity of Trio's client. Who was Trio's client?
Trio's client was Grand Canyon. Or, I'm not sure client's the right term, but in some ways the cities are the client too. They match prospect with jurisdiction. So in some ways we're clients, but and I think in the term you're using it, I would say Grand Canyon is what you're looking for.
Well, in what way would the city of Tucson be a client of Trio's?
Because they serve the region and they help us with prospects. They're the go-between for many cases for a client coming in or a prospect coming in looking for a site or looking for assistance in some way. So they serve us and they serve the prospect. They serve both.
Well, you know, I'm thinking of, let's say, someone has a piece of land for sale. Then there's maybe a real estate broker involved. The broker represents one party to another to the transaction, don't they?
Yes?
Yeah. So, in this case, to the city of Tucson's understanding is Trio has a client, and the client is Grand Canyon University.
That's not a term that I use. The term that I'm familiar with and most comfortable with is prospect. They have a prospect, a company looking to open up a second business in a region, and they come to Trio looking for assistance to pull the other jurisdictions together and gather information on, in this case it was land, but other times it's just what programs do you have.
Does Grand Canyon pay Trio for
No.
this service?
No, they do not.
Yeah. How do you know that?
That's not the model Trio uses.
Yeah. Well, how do you know that?
Just from my knowledge of the economic development field, I've never heard of a company paying an economic development agency for that type of assistance. I think that'd be highly, highly unusual. I've never heard of that.
Well, is there, does Grand Canyon sometime, or someone in their situation, hire someone called a site selector?
Yes, they do.
What does that term mean?
Site selector is when a company is looking to open up a second site or relocate. They hire somebody called a site selector who then gathers information, contacts regional economic development agencies or directly to cities, and they help with providing information back and forth.
Did Grand Canyon hire a site selector?
My understanding was at the time we first met with them, they did not have a site selector. They were using their internal people, and then at some point they hired a site selector.
Okay. And who was the site selector they hired?
The name is on the tip of my tongue. It's, I think it's Collier.
To the best of your memory.
That's my memory. I think it was Collier.
And tell me about Collier. Is that a person, a company?
That's a company.
Okay. And where are they from?
I think they're in Phoenix. They have an office in Phoenix, I believe. They may have other offices. I'm not familiar with Collier.
Then with Trio, their client is Grand Canyon, correct?
Prospect?
Yeah, their prospect is Grand Canyon.
Yeah. Yes.
And what role does Trio play in determining what the sales price or benefits would be to to Grand Canyon?
Sales price of a piece of land?
Yeah, when they interact with the city of Tucson, do they talk to you about the incentives that Grand Canyon would want?
They ask us what incentives we're offering, and then they explain those to the client, or they put them in a book to the prospect. So for a particular piece of land, it may be a private party transaction where, let's just use Grand Canyon in this case, finds a piece of land owned by a private individual. And Trio, I don't believe, would have a role in setting the price. Likewise, if it's a city-owned piece of land, I don't believe Trio would have any role in setting that price either. So I don't believe they have a role in setting land prices. They would ask us specifics about how our incentives work, and just to make sure they understand incentives. If it's we have a primary jobs incentive, they would say, explain here, these are the numbers, how much would this person, what would be the incentive value, dollar value of this incentive to this prospect.
Yeah. So, and did they do that in this case?
I'm going to note an objection here. Are you going to ever get to records, or are we just going through the process? What's your question about existence or retention of records in this process?
Well, the way I think it works is if we look at the process.
Okay, and he's told you the process.
Well, he's in the act of telling me the process. So, for instance, he has just said that that Trio would ask the city about incentives.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an important process question. So, Dennis, then the next question, once I understand this process, is to ask, do you have any writings or any written documents where Trio is inquiring about incentives?
Do I have any emails from Trio asking about
As
incentives?
the city of Tucson, yeah.
Well, we put together an incentive package, I believe, and sent it to Trio. So that whatever Trio has in their book is what we submitted to them.
Okay. Well, the incentives that are available are matters of record, that the city has certain policies and incentives that are available, correct?
Correct. We have certain incentives, programs, they're published.
Yeah. So if Trio has asked you about those incentives, are there any written records created in that request process?
There there are probably something. There's probably something on paper for how we calculated those numbers.
Yeah. Tell me about that.
For example, one of our incentives deals with taking the construction sales tax money that we would collect and putting that towards public infrastructure improvements. So we'd figure out what the value of that is, what the dollar amount of that is. So we would ask the prospect to approximate what they're going to be spending on their construction. Then we could estimate what the construction sales tax would be that we would collect, and then that would be the number they could use then for public infrastructure improvements.
Did you ask Grand Canyon that question?
Yes, we did.
Or did you ask Trio to get that information?
I believe we asked both. And the number did change.
Yeah, and who responded?
Who responded? We asked several people, I believe. Who in Trio? I think probably Daniela Gallagher, we probably asked her for the number. Or David Welsh with the construction. In the initial proposal that Grand Canyon put together, they had a dollar figure in there for what they were going to spend for construction. And I think we clarified that, made sure that was accurate. And we may have had a conversation with Grand Canyon asking them, is this the correct number or is it a different number?
At some point, let me just, I'll just go to item 6 at the moment. What's the city of Tucson's understanding of knowledge of Trio's conflict of interest policy?
I'm not aware of what their conflict of interest policy is. They're separate from the city.
Okay, so to be clear, the city of Tucson has no understanding of knowledge of Trio's conflict of interest policy. Is that correct?
That may not be true. I may, if they explain it to me, I may say I knew that.
No, my question here is on behalf of the city of Tucson. Are you prepared to testify about the city of Tucson's understanding or knowledge of Trio's conflict of interest policy?
I don't
if
know
any?
their conflict of interest policy off the top of my head. I may be familiar with it once I hear what it is.
My question's a little bit different.
Okay.
My question is does the city of Tucson have understanding or knowledge of Trio's conflict of interest policy?
We may be aware of it, but I can't recall it for you. So, I know it seems like a vague answer. I can't recall if they have a conflict of interest policy or what it is.
Okay, so you are not prepared to testify.
Do you have a question about records here? Because ask that question. Do we have a copy of their conflict of interest policy?
I do not have a copy of the conflict of interest policy.
Do you have a copy of their record retention or disclosure
I
policies?
do not have a copy of those records. I don't have any records related to Trio's conflict of interest policy or the retention policy or the disclosure policy. I don't have a record of that.
So we've now testified about it.
Well, Mr. McLaughlin has asked you a couple of questions, but I want you to answer my question. My question is what is the city of Tucson's understanding or knowledge of Trio's conflict of interest policy?
I'm not aware of their policies.
Okay. And is that answer on behalf of the city?
That's on behalf of this witness for the city.
Okay, so
There may be others who know,
well,
but he doesn't know.
I understand that, but I just wanted to be clear that in terms of the deposition of the city of Tucson.
No, there are potentially multiple witnesses of the city of Tucson, so let's move on.
Oh, we're moving on. And concerning their Trio's record retention and disclosure policies, does the city of Tucson have any knowledge or understanding of Trio's record retention or disclosure policies?
I do not have any knowledge of that or understanding.
Okay, and do you know if the city of Tucson does?
I do not know if other people do.
So when a representative of Trio is participating at any point in these negotiating processes, the city of Tucson has no information about what conflict of interest policies may be applicable to that person who's there representing Trio, correct?
Do you understand the question?
So if you could just say it one more time, it's kind of a long question.
Yeah, sure. Let's start off this, you know what conflict of interest is?
Yes.
Yeah. And you're required as a city employee not to have a personal financial stake in a decision, or that any of your relatives have a personal financial stake in a decision.
That's correct.
Yeah. So when someone from Trio is sitting in a meeting and participating in negotiations, the city of Tucson doesn't know whether that person has a conflict of interest, or whether their relatives have a conflict of interest, or whether there are any rules and regulations that apply to that person representing Trio, correct?
I would assume that they don't have a conflict of interest. I've never seen a written policy from Trio. The city would not be comfortable dealing with someone who has a conflict of interest. We would not allow that.
Yeah. So how would the city know? I mean, I think.
I don't think a policy stops somebody from having a conflict of interest. And I think that's irrelevant.
Well,
Maybe not irrelevant, but that doesn't ensure that that person doesn't have a conflict of interest. If Trio had a written policy of conflict of interest, that doesn't mean somebody in Trio staff doesn't actually have a conflict of interest. It's no guarantee.
Well, does the city's policy on conflict of interest affect whether you proceed in accord with that? Doesn't that have an effect on you?
It has effect on me personally, yes it does.
Yeah.
But even beyond that, it's not just because it's in a policy, it's because I'm ethical.
Right.
So I'm saying you could have 5 people from Trio who have a policy and they may ignore it because they're unethical people. So it doesn't ensure anything.
And they may not even have a policy.
They may
Because
not.
the city doesn't know if they have a policy. Isn't that, at least you don't, right?
I assume they do. I would hope they do. If they don't, they probably should. And that even if they did, that wouldn't give me full assurance that they wouldn't have that. I would have to put my faith in the organization and the individuals to know that they're ethical people in my dealings with them. City has a certain trust with the organizations it works with, not based on written policies only.
Let me look at number 7, the city's policy regarding the notation of telephone calls,
Yes.
city employees,
Uh-huh.
during consideration of Grand Canyon University's request for land in Pima County. I've seen a couple of documents, it looks like a city form where you make notations on phone calls and content.
I'm not familiar with the form.
Okay. Is that something you do in your job? Is there any form that you use?
I do not use a form when I'm receiving phone calls. No, I do not.
And is there any city policy regarding whether city employees should make notes of that?
There's
sort
no
of-
policy.
The item 8, the role of the city attorney's office and its involvement in the various proposals and offers of El Rio to Grand Canyon University.
Yes.
Are you prepared to testify about that?
Yes.
Yep, okay. Well, what is the role of the city attorney's office and its involvement in the various proposals?
They would advise us as to the legality and to the making sure that we're not violating the gift clause policy of the state. So they would look at proposals, make sure we're following the law.
Was advice given?
Yes.
And was it written?
I do not believe we have written advice in the attorney's office on anything, but there were conversations.
But nothing in writing?
I do not believe there's anything in writing.
You're talking about the proposals, Bill, is that right?
Yeah. You mentioned gift clause. Was there any other aspect where the city attorney's office was requested and provided legal advice?
I'm trying to recall, I think they were involved when we talked about possibility of selling a real golf course. They were looking at what encumbrances we have on the property, whether we own it outright, what kind of other contracts we may have. So they were looking at the legal aspects of could it be sold.
And that was at whose request?
I don't believe anybody asked them. The city attorney's office was knowledgeable about the project, and when El Rio came up as a possibility, the attorney's office started answering those questions, or tried to get answers for those questions.
And did they provide any written opinions or response?
I don't recall that they did.
Do you know who asked them?
Again, I don't know that they were formally asked. They were knowledgeable about the project and then did the work that they needed to do.
The am I correct that the city of Tucson has never sold a park, as far as you know, in the history of the city?
Just not an objection, lack of personal knowledge. If you know,
I do
feel
not
free to answer. Sorry?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I personally do not know the answer to that question.
Do you know if the city of Tucson has ever sold any public property that was in use by the city?
Same objection. Go ahead and answer if you know.
I do not know personally. If you haven't known.
I don't have a copy of this document, but I'll show it to you for identification. It's got some of my handwriting on it. It says Tucson Regional Economic Opportunities Project Assessment System. Is that a trio system, or is that the cities? What is that?
This is a document Trio's put together. This is what they typically do for prospects.
And this document is something that they provide to the city of Tucson for your evaluation of
I believe they provide this. I think we're able to get a copy, but I think the intent is to give it to the economic analysis firm for their work. But I'm not sure. But I've seen that form. We have access to those forms. I'm familiar with that form.
and the economic analysis firm is the one that did the economic study.
Yes.
That, Sarah, what's her name?
Sarah Murley from Applied Economics worked on this one, I believe.
I'm looking for some documents for some additional questions. It's about 11:25, so I'd like to suggest we take a lunch break and.
No, I've got to help my significant other with a doctor's appointment at 3. She's broken both her wrists. So, I'm not sure I can do an afternoon session of this. We may need to recess and continue it. So do you want to keep going? Go look for your documents and then keep going? I need to be home by 2. And that's probably a 30-minute drive.
Well, let's go off the record and take a little break for a moment now.
Time is 11:26, we're going off the record. It is 1 p.m. and we're back on the record.
Yeah, Mr. Kaselemis, when you're having a meeting and you want to use the conference room at City Hall, is there a procedure on which room and how you do it?
You can select a room through the group-wise system that we have.
What's it called?
Group-wise?
Uh-huh. How does that work?
When you send an appointment to various people, you can also put in a conference room name. It comes up and lets you know whether that's vacant or not. That's one way. You can also just pop into a room that looks like it's vacant and sit in it, like we did here. Or just go into someone's office if you're having a small meeting, like if Dennis comes down to talk to me, we don't schedule an appointment, he comes down to my office and sits down.
This, take a look at Exhibit 5, that CHPO through CHDOM2, are those indications of rooms, conference rooms?
No. Because the conference rooms start off with CR. So this is somebody Gallego probably, and this is Diana Rose, and there's others. So if it was a conference room, it would say CR underscore 4th floor, blah, blah, blah.
My limited knowledge, and I'll let IT override me, I think CHPO simply stands for City Hall Post Office.
Yeah.
And then it's a 3, as in there's certain servers
Right.
that are served. And I don't know all the technical. In the DOM, I I don't know what that is, and that I'm already beyond my knowledge.
Okay.
But
Well, I think that's all I have of this witness.
okay.
So then, we should be busy today. Maybe tomorrow can get together with you about a time for...
Yes, yes. I don't know that it would be tomorrow that we would do it, but.
Oh,
for
sure,
certain,
no,
yeah, but yes, absolutely.
What I'm saying is I'll communicate with you tomorrow.
Yes.
And see if we can arrive at a time and date to continue the deposition.
Sure.
So we'll just adjourn today.
You're through with Chris. We're talking about for Hector and probably for somebody from IT. Is that what you mean? Just want to be clear.
Yeah.
Okay, your plan is a good one. We will
Okay.
talk tomorrow. Thank you.
And I hope your girlfriend...
Yeah, I hope so too. I hope she's out of the casts today. That's what we'll have to say.
So
On the record after tape change.
I believe that we've never seen or received any documents with any calculations.
There's one right here. This is a working document with calculations on it.
It's Exhibit 6.
Yes. This is not an offer letter, like it's a working document. As you can see, the offer letter differs. So there may be another, so that, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, but this thing, for instance, is there anything in here about the consequences of a large piece of property remaining tax-free for 50 years? There's no calculation here, correct?
There's no calculation on here of the benefit of a $180 million investment either. This is not an all-inclusive document, and I don't know that one exists.
Well,
The information that Sarah Murley has should have that, some of that information. The applied economics analysis.
yeah, but your office would have given her information as to, for instance, the taxes and the ground lease and the length of term and so forth, right?
Yes?
Okay, so, just to be clear, as the city of Tucson has no document, either electronically or written, that would show the calculations of the value over a 50-year period of time of the El Rio property being tax-free.
I'm not aware of every piece of paper that you have. There could be something in there. If
Well-
you're saying you don't have it, that's,
Well,
I don't have anything else. Everything I have, you have.
no. Everything you have, you've testified that you gave to the city attorney's office.
That's correct.
Yeah. You don't know what I have, do you?
No, I don't.
And we don't know what you have either. We don't know what documents you're referring to. Do we know your assumptions are right, that there are no working documents? And you haven't shown him any documents other than this one.
So, my question, though, relates to the city of Tucson, whether the city of Tucson is aware of any documents, and specifically, the issue is whether such documents exist, whether you prepared them.
If I, excuse me, if I would have prepared any documents and I had them in my folder, they would have been turned over to the city attorney's office.
Do you
And-
know?
I mean, the bottom line is, if this is what's in the offer letter, then that passed the test of the gift clause.
Well,
So, how we got there, I mean, you could do a calculation of this right now, and we could show that It provides a benefit to the taxpayers.
Yeah, but is there not any working papers anywhere that the city has that shows the process of calculating these numbers?
Again, if it's information that we've already, some records we may have, I mean, anything I had went to the city attorney.
Would you agree that, I mean, who received this document, Exhibit 6?
I don't believe it was given to anybody. I think it was an internal working document.
Internally, who received the document within the city of Tucson?
Who saw the document? Because receipts makes it seem like I sent it to somebody. I don't believe I sent it to anybody. I believe I may have taken it to a meeting. Other people may have taken a look at it. It may have been the basis for a conversation.
Who prepared this document?
I believe it came from my office. So either I did, or I would say either me or Camila Bacat, who works for me.
Do you know which one prepared it?
If it was Camila, it was based on her notes from my work, from my mouth, from telling me, going over information.
Was this the result of a longer process and study?
Longer than what?
Did you have meetings in which various of these items were discussed?
I had internal meetings.
Yeah. Were documents prepared and notes made at those internal meetings?
Yes. Exhibit 6.
Do you know, this was prepared at a meeting, a single meeting?
It may have been the result of a meeting.
Yeah.
So it may have been that I was meeting with Camila. I'm just surmising here. And I said, let's put something together that does 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and see what it looks like. She may have typed this up.
What's the date of the preparation of this document?
It preceded the May 8th one. I don't know the exact date. I don't usually date stuff like this.
Okay. So just to be clear, the city of Tucson does not know the date this document was created.
Except
Correct.
that it was prior to May 8th.
Prior to May 8th.
Okay.
Probably pretty close to it.
Okay. And,
I'd say April or May.
yeah, and you don't know who prepared it, but you think it was either you or Camilla Bicat.
Thus, we do know who prepared it.
And that was who?
Either me or Camila Bacat.
Okay. And you're not aware now of the existence of any work papers with these various elements within them, the analysis of those elements.
I'm not aware of any, no.
And the, back again to the 75% below market value.
Mm-hmm.
How did the city of Tucson come up with the idea that proposing it a lease at 75% of the market value would be a good idea?
I'll go back to what I said before. There are a lot of different components, and bottom line is we need to make sure we're receiving more in taxes than we're giving out. So it was the figure thrown out there to make, and if it worked or didn't work, I don't know. It doesn't say here. So it was just a developed figure, a proposed figure, internal proposed figure.
The proposal that a portion of those payments go toward equity for an eventual purchase.
Mhm.
Whose idea was that?
I can't recall.
Now, what's Camilla's job title?
Economic Development Specialist.
And what's her expertise?
She's an Economic Development Specialist.
Okay, I think you testified at trial that your have an accounting background.
I have an accounting degree.
Yeah. Do you know what kind of degree Camilla has?
She has an undergraduate degree and a master's degree, and I can't remember the exact subject areas.
Yeah.
Not accounting though, not financial.
And how long she worked for the city?
About a year.
The the proposal that a portion of each payments go toward equity for an eventual purchase.
Yeah.
Was there any calculations done as to what portion or how that element would work and what the value of that would be?
I don't recall that there was at this point. It was probably just an idea at this point and not totally fleshed out.
So these like ideas that are in here are these ideas that you circulate in the office with others, or do you and Camilla just come up with them?
I'm trying to recall exactly, it may have been, here are some ideas, and if someone, I may have passed them by, and certainly in my office to Camila, maybe to Hector, and maybe to other people, to see if these types of ideas make sense. And then if someone were to say, get more information on those, we may not have not done the analysis until we got to the point where people were okay with those types of arrangements. So maybe we didn't do them yet at this point.
At this point, had the city received information from Grand Canyon as to what elements they might be looking for in a deal?
We had heard they were looking for a long-term lease.
Anything else?
They were looking not to put a large amount of money up front. Not to outlay a large amount of money up front. Is what we had heard.
Okay. So what you had heard was that the purchaser wanted to keep the title in city's name so they don't pay taxes on the land, that they want...
I didn't say that.
No? I thought you said they wanted you knew they wanted a ground lease.
They wanted a long-term lease. It could have been a piece of private property too. We weren't only looking at our property. So we had heard that they didn't want to buy have a big outlay of cash up front to buy a piece of land. So the city's property was one property. So if they would have done a long 50-year lease with somebody, a private person, there would have been tax liability on the land.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the city had heard that these guys want a big piece of land as cheap as they can get it.
That's not what he said.
No, they want a big piece of land by not putting out much money.
Not coming up with a large cash outlay up front.
Right. And,
Which this idea does have a large cash outlay up front, actually. Number 5 there is 2.5 million.
the portion of each payment that would go toward equity,
Mhm.
how was that developed? How was that idea developed? What was the process within the city?
I can't remember
of
whose
that
idea that
proposal?
was.
Number 2, it says, we need to start with an appraisal to arrive at a market value. There was an appraisal subsequently done by Greg Lee. Is that the appraisal that was referred to?
No, that was not an appraisal.
Okay. Which was not an appraisal?
The one by Greg Lee wasn't an official appraisal, it was called something else. An appraisal had a different term to it.
Okay. So, would it be correct then that the city never obtained an appraisal?
We obtained an appraisal, I can't think of the term. Is that it? Some kind of restricted condition report? I don't know if that's the name of it. Hector can give you the name of that. It's similar to an appraisal, but it's not called an appraisal. But it's just kind of semantics.
did the city of Tucson ever obtain a market value appraisal of the El Rio property?
That's a question better answered by Hector. Because we got a market value for the property based on work done by professional appraisers. It wasn't called an official appraisal of the property. But it did assign a value, or it assigned a value range, I believe.
So, this, offer proposal was the information and the ideas in the offer proposal of Exhibit 6 eventually put into Exhibit 7.
Objection, I don't believe that's accurate, because you indicated there were changes.
It's not the same. There may be some similarities, but it's not the same. I'm just looking here. This has a lease payment of $303,000. I think that has $257,000. I think.
So prior to the May 8th, 2013 proposal sent by the city manager to Grand Canyon University's general counsel, was there a market appraisal of the property, the real property that you're aware of?
There was, again, I'm not a real estate expert, I don't know the exact term, there was work done by professional appraisers to assign a value to the property based on market sale of property in the Tucson area for pieces of land that large. It was, and I think it ended up with a range of values per square foot.
Yeah, but it was not in a market value appraisal, correct?
Objection, he's said what it is about 3 times. So don't characterize it. He said what it is. I just don't want editorializing.
Yeah,
Ask
yeah.
him a question.
So what do you say it was? I didn't understand it.
The figure we got, and again, Hector is a better person to explain it. He contracted with professional appraisal people to get a market value, to assign a market value range to the property based on what properties of that size was sold recently in Tucson. It's got the components of an appraisal, but it's not an official appraisal. It's called something else, and it assigns a range. It's based on the same, very similar things. You go out and you look at what has a large chunk of land sold for in Tucson in the past couple of years, and what kind of value should this have. And they come back with a range and say this is between whatever it is, $350 and $450 a square foot.
All right?
Yeah, it was something, whatever you call it, that developed a range. But it wasn't an appraisal, market value appraisal. Okay. That's what he said, right?
It is what it is. He said what he said. I'm not saying what he said.
Okay. The item 3 here, that the proposal is to subtract out the value of land that would be open to the public. And so with 10 acres for a walking path, then that is subtracted from the market value.
Correct.
Was there ever any analysis of the value of that component, that proposal?
Yes, if you look down below, it says $15 million market value, 10% subtracted out, $1.5 million.
Okay, so the analysis of the city was that if there's a walking path and it takes 10%, we simply take 10% off the sale price.
Objection, not what he said. What are you including in your question about a walking path?
No, I'm just saying it's a straight subtraction. There's no analysis beyond what we can see on this paper, or was there?
I think you're correct. I think whatever percentage that they were gonna keep open to the public, we would take out of the 100 acres, of the value of the 100 acres. So if it was 15%, we would have taken 15% off.
Item 4, to arrive at the annual lease payment. Would you describe this process of how you came up with those numbers?
Let's see. I think Hector's the better person to answer that question. The 9%, I believe, is a rate of return that is reasonable. So I'm not gonna be able to explain it well enough. I would ask Hector.
Are there any rules or procedures that the city has of the process that you go through in terms of coming up with numbers and ideas and numbers of years for leases and so forth?
Each project is unique, and we try to meet the needs, meet the law, plus get an interest from a prospect if we're interested in having them locate their business here. So there aren't any 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rules. Like there couldn't possibly be. Depending on specific aspects, there may be, we have a policy about this, but we don't have a policy about this. So it's our job to put together various deal points within the parameters of the law and the city policy.
Yeah. So, this Exhibit 7, this May 8th letter, signed by the city manager with a copy to yourself.
Yes?
And there's 5 people, are all 5 people in the city manager's office?
Yes.
And do I understand correctly that the contents of that letter had not been approved by the mayor and council?
That's correct.
That this is entirely the city staff came up with these proposals?
Correct.
And never the mayor and council would say, hey, do you think it's a good idea, not a good idea, how does this sound? None of that, right?
Correct.
So are there, you had just talked about how that you do stuff within the context of city policies. What policies are applicable to this kind of proposal?
What I stated was that our job is to put together, to be responsive to prospects by putting together information that we think will be interesting to them and that they would find, that would help them to make a decision within the parameters of law and city policy. And there's some areas city policy has nothing to do with.
Well,
So we may not have a written policy based on something, and we may put that in there if it's reasonable, and we don't have,
did anyone tell you that this proposal was within the law and city policies?
I believe the city attorney looked over the proposed terms. I'm not sure if he did a full analysis, but he did look over the proposal.
So is this a situation where before this proposal sent out by the city manager that the city attorney's office approves it?
It's typical, yes.
And is there any writings that would show that?
Noted objection, attorney-client privilege. Material could be attorney-client privilege.
I'm not asking about the contents, I'm asking you if there's any writings in response to that.
Yeah, you can go ahead and answer that.
I'm not aware of any. Do you need to see this?
Yeah. Take a look. Let me see this. Then, what, did you have any, yourself, any role in the production of Exhibit 7, the May 8th, 2013 letter?
Yes.
And which was what?
I believe I would probably had a larger author role than anybody. So I kind of put the information together based on conversations. So I was the kind of compiler and the proposer.
So did you write this?
I believe I wrote a draft, and it didn't end up, my draft did not end up to be the final version,
Do you write these things on the computer?
typically.
Yeah. And then do you send them to other people and say, how does this look? What changes you want to make?
Sometimes I do that, sometimes we do it in person.
Do you recall what process you used for this letter?
I don't remember. There may have been a draft.
Is it, may have been, is it probable that you did a draft?
There's probably is a draft. There probably was a draft of that.
Yeah. And
What may have happened also, and I'm thinking there may have been a draft that then got typed over to make that one. So it may not have existed after that one. So if I send you a draft and you take it and you write something, that wouldn't exist then.
you mentioned some of the terms that changed from Exhibit 6 to the letter of May 8th. Correct?
Yeah, and I'm not saying this is the only piece of information that went into that. There may have been other pieces of information. This may have been an earlier proposal, internal proposal. I'm not saying it went from 1 to 2.
Do you know
This-
which was first and which was second? And
This was an earlier version that played a role in that.
yeah, second,
And
right?
so 6 played a version in 7.
Yeah. But do you also know were there meetings in between?
There were conversations.
Were there documents created in between
I
as a
don't
result of those conversations?
Many times none. I don't recall specifically if there were.
So, this letter made talks about the primary jobs in incentives, and the value of tax credits and so forth. Do you know who developed those?
I believe I did, I did.
Yeah. And would that have been contained in a document?
It was probably, it was also corroborated by the applied economics firm. So, I don't think it's a document. I think if it's $180 million, take a look at that.
Yeah.
The figure may have come from something we got from Ernie Duarte in his shop, phone conversation with Ernie. Also, typically we take if we're trying to ballpark an estimate, we take the investment construction dollars to be spent, multiplied by 65%, multiplied by 2%, goes up to a rough approximation of construction sales tax. Construction sales tax is paid on the materials, not the labor, so you back out the labor, you back out 35%.
So Ernie Duarte is likely to have given information?
I may have done it in my head or on a little piece of paper. It's not that difficult of a calculation.
Yeah.
I could probably recalculate it right now if you'd like me to. There. That's exactly what I said.
The
180 million times 65% times 2% approximates the city's construction sales tax. There's no documentation needed. I did it on my calculator.
Were you aware of, as of May 8th, that actually Grand Canyon was not projecting 180 million in expenditures?
That's the figure they told us they were projecting. If they had a different figure, we would have done a different calculation.
Did the city do calculations of what it would, what the penalty would be to cancel the First Tee program? Break that contract?
Penalty, we were in discussions with them to talk about moving them to another location and maybe even enhancing their program. So there were options for them that we were talking with them about. We knew they wanted to stay in business and we wanted to continue to do business with them. So we talked about moving them to another golf course or multiple golf courses where the kids could play, and maybe even building some facilities for them, actually improving their position.
I think my question was, did you develop a dollar figure of that?
Of what?
Of what it would cost to break the contract with First Tee?
We did not. What we told them was, we want to move you, if this deal goes through, would you be interested in moving to another location and possibly getting an enhanced contract where there are more opportunities for the kids? So we didn't talk to them about kicking them out and what would the cost of that to be. That was not the conversation we had with them. We had no interest in breaking the contract with them.
Well, where it says in this letter, for instance, quote, "There will be a significant cost to the city to break this contract and relocate First Tee."
Right. So there would have been a cost to the city to keep them whole.
Right.
There may have been a
There
figure.
would be a significant cost to the city, is what the letter says. Did you calculate what that cost would be?
I think Kelly Gottschalk came up with the figure for if they were to walk away, what was remaining, the remaining, I don't know if it's debt on the contract. They had made some investments into El Rio, and if they were to break that, not moving to another location, and there was a settlement, we had a figure in mind what that settlement figure would be.
Do you know what that was?
I don't recall exactly. I can't recall.
In February, you had solicited letters of support for Grand Canyon to make a deal with the city, correct?
Solicited letters, I had, yes.
Yeah. And how many persons did you solicit for support letters?
I solicited, I believe, 2.
And 2 were received.
Yes.
Did you draw any blanks? Did you ask other people for letters but didn't get them?
I do not believe I did.
Yeah. And did you suggest to those people, such as the person at Pima College, what you wanted in the letter?
I asked them if they'd be interested in writing a letter of support for Grand Canyon coming. I didn't give them a draft or any. I left it pretty much how I said it.
And was that activity something that your supervisors requested you to engage in?
No, I was not asked to do that.
Did you make this request to those individuals in writing?
No, in person. Well, for Pima Community College, I had a meeting with I'm not sure what her title was, interim chancellor, I think. And at the end of our meeting, I talked about Grand Canyon. She says she was very excited to have them come, would be very excited to have them come to Tucson. I said, oh, would you be willing to put that in a letter? She said, absolutely. I'll get you a letter today. So that was in person.
And that was with the thought that Grand Canyon would be coming to city of Tucson land?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. So, earlier you had testified that city staff came up with proposals to sell a city park to Grand Canyon with no authority from the city council for the proposal, correct?
This offer letter had not been approved by the mayor and council.
Yeah.
And said that, correct?
What's that?
Said that, correct? Subject to approval?
Right.
Is there a city policy concerning your going out and lining up letters in support of a deal that the mayor and council knows nothing about and had never approved?
There's no policy regarding that.
Do you know if other people in your office within the city was trying to drum up support for a deal that the mayor and council had never approved?
Well, I think you're mischaracterizing it a little bit. I think when we have players that are important, like Pima Community College, their relationship with Grand Canyon, whether they would be in favor of that or they would feel threatened by that, that's important information for the city staff to know. So to ask them, is this a Grand Canyon a threat to you? Or is it something that you are excited about or something you're neutral about, is important information for us. If Pima Community College was all up in arms, or the University of Arizona was, that would be important information for city staff to know. So it's not a matter of going out, drumming up support for something, it's asking them, what do you think of Grand Canyon? And them saying, we're very pleased, that would be an enhancement of our school. If that university were here. We could offer their kids students. In fact, we could even send our bus around to help pick up some of their students. We're excited by that. And then for me to say, well, that's important information that you're telling me, could you put that in a letter? That's different than soliciting.
Was there any written requests to Pima College as to what effect it might have on Pima College if Grand Canyon was in Tucson?
No.
Was there any, other than what you said at the end of the meeting, saying like, gee, would you write a letter saying your support? Was there any actual detailed discussions with Pima College of what the effect might be?
There were no, just what I said, there were no in-depth discussions besides them telling us they thought it was an asset.
Was there any analysis within the city manager's office that might be reflected in a written document as to what the effect might be on University of Arizona and Pima College if a private online university was in Tucson?
I don't believe so. I mean, it was something that I personally felt would be a benefit to both. And I asked the question to the chancellor, and she acknowledged she thought it was a benefit also. It wasn't something I was trying to document one way or the other, or prove one way or the other. There was no financial analysis done.
You requested a letter from a Christian minister, did you not?
Is there a letter, who's the letter from? Do you have a copy of it?
I'm going from memory, but I recall it.
I thought I had a letter from, was there a letter from Push Ridge Academy, maybe?
And what was the purpose of that?
To see if they were interested, if that would be a positive thing for them.
And did you contact other Christian educators?
I contacted Desert Christian High School and Push Ridge Academy.
And did the city do an analysis of how many potential students there might be from these Christian educational institutions?
No.
There was a suggestion that the city might institute a 2% dorm tax.
Yes.
Yeah. How did that suggestion come about?
I believe that was an idea by Kelly Gottschalk.
And what would describe the idea?
As I recall, it would be similar to right now the city has a commercial lease tax, where if I own a shopping center and lease a space to you, we charge 2% of the lease rate. So I think the idea was to put in place something similar to that, where Grand Canyon would be leasing their space to students and charge 2% of the rent that students pay. And I believe it was something that was instituted on their Phoenix campus, which Kelly knew about. As an idea based on something that's already existed with Grand Canyon.
And there is no dorm tax now, correct?
I don't believe there is.
And if there were to be a 2% dorm tax, it would have included dorms at the University of Arizona?
I'm not familiar with how it would work.
Well, you don't think you could just tax dorms of Grand Canyon University, but not tax dorms at the University of Arizona?
That's out of my area of expertise. It's a legal question.
Well, I mean, U of A's public, but was there any analysis of how that might affect the university, or how it might affect apartments or any other multiple living arrangements?
It was, I believe it was envisioned to apply only to Grand Canyon.
And you know, if there are any documents that discuss that?
I don't believe there are any documents.
We can take a break and I may be through with this with
Okay.
some of these things.
Take a recess?
Yeah, I just wanted to, talk to my client.
Sure.
See what
You
else.
want us to leave, or you wanna leave?
Take your pick.
What do you wanna do, Chris?
Yeah, let's stay here.
Okay.
We're going off the record, the time is 12:48.